My segment's called, I'm going to keep naming them.
You just won't quit.
Not my first air rodeo.
They're getting better.
Thank you. Okay, so talk about Glendale Central Air Terminal, which is what I'm going to talk about. We have to talk about Glendale, and with that, we have to talk about
Zanku chicken.
Everyone's had some. Leslie Brand. Okay, anybody who doesn't know anything about...
You should have called this On Brand.
Glendale was a 150-acre subsection of Rancho San Rafael and was squared off and purchased by 6 families in 1877. Became incorporated in 1906. In the late 1980s.
Ready Player One is getting implanted into Calvin Klein's head or whoever wrote that book.
In the late 1890s, it was civilized and had like a westerny feel to it. But the modernizing of Glendale is mostly credited with one man who is called the father of Glendale, Leslie Coombs Brand. Glendale was already seemingly well off, but with Brand's help, they extended the Pacific Electric line farther into Glendale, and with this, the population boomed in the area. He owned the title and guarantee and trust company. He developed the main drag of Glendale, which is now called Brand Boulevard. He planted palm trees. He personally planted palm trees.
Johnny Palmseed.
He put up the first country club in Glendale. He opened the city's second bank, which is worth credit. He opened a telephone company, the Mirador Water Company, Power and Light Company. He opened up all these utilities. He was out creating subdivisions and always promoting Glendale. He put out full-page ads which would have you been to Glendale? And back in those days when anyone knew was dirt and wood, Glendale sounds nice.
He was good at branding.
Anything else? Branding like in hot poker?
Yeah. I've been branded.
Leslie Brand lived in the hills of Glendale along the Verdugo Mountains in a place he called Miradero, which is Spanish for the lookout. Many people called it the Brand Castle, though. He owned a huge plot of land around it, almost down to where Glen Oaks Boulevard is, which is a huge stretch. Brand was a little guy, and just like little guys who obsess over control, he liked new toys built just for him. His home was one of those toys. He went to the Chicago World's Fair, the Columbia Exposition in 1893, and saw a British-sponsored
Isn't that the H.H. Holmes one?
I don't know. I don't think it is, but I don't know.
I think we might know who the H.H. Holmes killer is now.
Who killed H.H. Holmes? That's what we've been trying to figure out for years.
Who was H.H. Holmes? Was it H.H. Holmes or was it Leslie Coombs Brand? He shouldn't have eaten that piece of pizza.
And he did.
Caught him.
So he visits this Chicago World's Fair. He sees the Columbian Exposition. It's 1893. He sees a British-sponsored East Indian Pavilion, and he thought, gimme. He hired his brother-in-law.
How do I colonize them?
His brother-in-law, Nathaniel Dryden, to build it. In 1904, it was finished. It's a beautiful building with elements of Spanish and Moorish and Indo-Saracenic architecture and design. When it comes to vehicles, though, which we're going to be talking about, he was one of the first guys to own a car in the area. The Tioga Wolf, he called it. I can't figure out which. It's custom built. There's like a hot rod and old custom car website that my brother's been looking at for like 20 years, and I finally used it today looking up the Jalopy Journal because everyone's talking about the Tioga Wolf.
Is it really called the Jalopy Journal?
Yeah.
That's fun.
It's cool.
So, I don't know about that, but...
Driving the Tioga Wolf was his driver, Mr. Fletcher Pomeroy, who was his escort, his chauffeur, and he would drive him around. But this new thing caught Brand's Flancy, no
cutting in line.
Flying machines.
They
weren't called airplanes at the time.
That.
Well, Flancy that, flying fancy.
Can't you call this segment that now?
I came up with a good name. And you laughed.
Well, fancy that.
Well, that's on brand. Now, flying machines were relatively new. It's 1904. Flying as a human being was relatively new. The Wright brothers took flight officially in September of 1903 with the Kitty Hawk, started test runs of Kitty Hawk. Finally, in 1903, they did it.
In my research, I also had to look back. Like, when did the first people fly?
Yeah.
That's a lot more recent than I thought it was.
Oh, yeah, no, it wasn't. It was only 110 years ago.
Yeah, I was still in diapers.
The diapers were made of burlap at the time, though. And it wasn't for pooping. It was for another thing, but I kept pooping.
Well, my diapers were made out of airplane wings.
Flying machines, they were all the jazz at the time. You couldn't have rage, you needed that for the war. So they were all the jazz at the time, which was also impending. Aviation enthusiasm was sweeping the Southland. The first flying machine landed at Glendale in 1905. It was called the California Aero, ARROW, was being flown by a guy named Roy. Oh my God, Roy Nabenshoe. Nabenshoe was an aviation engineer and an aviator from Ohio. Not many people in 1905, Southern California, had seen a flying machine, so this was like a surreal occasion to see a man take flight and come into town. It was a big deal. He arrived in town in his 52-foot-long Baldwin dirigible, which is a blimp-like vehicle, or as the paper at the time called it, a steerable balloon, which I'm like, it is. They're not wrong. It had a Curtiss 2-cylinder motorcycle engine driving a 6-foot tractor propeller. In perfect conditions, it can go a little over 20 miles per hour. And you had to pedal hard. No. The California Aero raced a Pope Toledo racing car from Schutz Park, which we talked about before, which was...
They had an air-land race?
Yeah, from Schutz Park, which is Washington and Olive, to the Hotel Raymond in Pasadena. Speeding towards the 10-mile finish line, it's 10 miles away. The airship beat the car by 2 minutes.
You can make a direct path.
Yeah, for sure. But it's funny is like cars weren't that popular, neither were planes, so you just kind of had to wait for the news for who won. Like you see them take off, like, well, I'll never know what happened.
Well, when my next kid's born, I'll name it after the winner.
So that was like front page news, obviously, and it put the idea of leisurely air travel in the minds of Southern California residents.
Emphasis on leisurely.
It seemed like the Wright brothers made flight possible, but now it was up to scores of other weirdos and daredevils to turn into both a revolutionary method of travel and a gimmick.
Yeah.
And they did both those things.
It's where we are right now with space travel.
Yeah, exactly.
Only it's taken a lot longer.
Glendale resident and high school student saw Nabenshue's arrival to LA. His name was Edgar S. Smith. He was so inspired by seeing the flying machine, he took the same steps the Wright brothers did
One small step.
towards...
Kitty Hawk.
This actually is one step close to Kitty Hawk. He looked to the Wright brothers' inspiration, Octave Chanute, for inspiration.
What are these names?
They're old-timey names. Chanute had engineered a biplane hang glider that had inspired, like I said, the Wright brothers. So Smith, in a wood shed in Glendale, devised a triplane. Basically, his triplane was designed like a huge box kite with wings spanning about 16 feet with a centerpiece featuring 6-foot foot extensions from high angles. So it's mostly just kicking.
This sounds terrifying.
I don't think it worked. It sounded really wacky. But what I'm just trying to get at is people were trying now. Like it had inspired people in Glendale. I don't know why specifically in Glendale. I think because they had they were a little more well off, and there was a lot of stuff. And
Free
then
time.
Brand was there with we'll get to Brand. Before it was used as a mode of transportation or to shoot down Nazi planes, the only two purposes for aviation were getting rich people from A to B and daredevil stunts.
A biplane taking down Nazi planes. Pedal faster.
Pedal faster, boy.
The Red Baron's on us.
We gotta shoot down Hitler. Pedal faster. I'm trying to aim through these clouds.
I need to shoot down Goebbels' dirigible. Hand me my dart gun.
Before we move on to the airport and practical uses.
Wars are funny.
Wars are funny, especially old ways of fighting. Fencing.
All of those wars that were settled with fencing.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Touche.
On guard. On brand. Now, before we move on to the airport and practical uses of a new mode of transportation that would change everyone's lives, let's get to one more story in aviation about aviation and planes, but let's first of all, talk about Brand. It's the late 19-teens. Brand, after another automobile breakdown in his long drive up to Mono Lake, which is near Yosemite, he had a cabin there. Brand hated that distance time-wise. He hated that long drive to Yosemite in a car that couldn't go past 50 or something, like a mile a minute. So he turns to Pomeroy and he says, "Pomeroy, do you think you could manage an aeroplane?" And Pomeroy replied, "Well, sir, flying up there among the clouds must certainly have advantages over the highway travel, but it's the devil of a long way to fall." Thanks,
That's
Pomeroy.
not what I asked.
Pomeroy declined his duty to pilot an aircraft, so he didn't suffer the same fate as Icarus. So Brand, now with his own custom-built airplane, a Curtiss JN6H, or Hesso Jenny, that's what he called it, Hesso Jenny, hired
You're so Jenny.
Stop that. He hired a completely reliable guy named Lieutenant Elon Brown, who continually crashed into things, and Brand had to move on to a Packard I want to say Pierre, but it's P-E-R-E, LaPierre.
That means daddy.
With no Elon Brown. I heard that, these are things I've heard from people before, and I couldn't find stuff. I heard he had a plane made of really heavy wood that was too heavy to go anywhere. And I also heard he had a limousine plane, which might be the same plane, another problematic design of his. And he was frequently upset that his planes couldn't take off from his home due to his house sits at the bottom of the Verdugo Mountains. So he can't lift off from his house because they're either going downhill, which you can't do to take off, or you go uphill and hit the mountains. So like there was just this struggle. So he wanted an airfield. So
why can't you go downhill to take off?
I think you have to like get off the ground, and it's hard to do if you're
if you go off a cliff, like GoldenEye.
Everything's GoldenEye with you, the GoldenEye killer.
Odd Job. That was a different one, but he's in the game. Trevelyan.
He has an airfield on his property.
For England, James.
I'm trying to talk here.
I'm trying to make you die, or whatever Dr. No says. Go on.
I'm trying to make you fly.
Fancy that.
So he has an airfield further down on his property. It has a hangar and everything. It's April Fool's, 1921. And Brand has a well-to-do man-about-town party on his property, April Fool's, 1921. But if you drove up to this party, up to Miradero, you would find the gates locked and your invitation declined, as this was a fly-in only party, a fly-in party. And the only way you can attend his party is you had to have a plane and land it on his property if you wanted to do keg stands or hide in the bathroom from your boyfriend after they stood at the punch bowl with Gloria Swanson too long, and he has to stand on the other side of the door and be like, "Roberta, I was telling her I like her movie. I don't like her. I like her movies."
I like the character of Gloria Swanson. What a character.
And boy, Jimmy. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Roberta. In attendance, among other others were Cecil B. DeMille.
Cecil B. DeMille?
Cecil B. DeMille.
That's the duck version of Cecil B. DeMille.
Mary Pickford. Ruth Rowland. Mary Pickford is literally everywhere. Was she like the mayor of town? She might have been.
Hey, that's another topic we've never been able to cover.
You know what? One day with a sit and just both talk about Mary Pickford for a whole episode.
I'll cover what she did by day and you cover what she did by night.
There's a picture with him with two actresses, Ruth Rowland and Mary Mills Minter. I don't know who they are, but I know that they're in a photo with Brand, who's smiling, and then Mrs. Brand is beside them, and she looks mad. Aviation pioneer Jimmy Doolittle was there. American ace fighter Eddie Rickenbacker was there. Cowboy star Tom Mix was there. The president of Standard Oil was there. Guests received a hefty lunch, which you would have loved, served in the clubhouse, which burned down.
You had me at hefty.
A hefty bag full of lunch. Also at the party, a big oak cask full of 50 gallons of sour mash whiskey, which everyone was drinking. And the party jazzes on, and the pilots are like, I gotta go home. And they've been drinking whiskey for a couple hours. So they get back on their flying machines that are a bicycle on leather bat wings powered by a trumpet or whatever.
Wait a minute. Mary Pickford flew in?
Maybe someone flew her in. Maybe
someone flew.
Maybe Doug Fairbanks flew her in. I just heard on the walk over here that he used to lock himself up in a motel room, get completely naked, sit in the bathtub, and drink until he got DTs. Anyways.
Wow.
That has a little bit to do with the story because
caught me off guard.
People are getting drunk and they've been flying and they're flying the wackiest planes you've ever seen. And then two planes almost collided with each other, but the soberer pilot dived under the other pilot and that other pilot clipped some eucalyptus trees, the only casualty. Brand later had those eucalyptus trees cut, probably because of this incident. One of the drunk pilots was Anita Netta Snook. Do you remember that name?
That was Amelia Earhart's instructor.
Yep.
Oh my God.
She was the one that...
She's blaming Amelia for crashing into all the trees? You can't drink a barrel of sour mash whiskey and
then take flight. She was the person in that accident.
Wow.
Anyways, so obviously flight was on everyone's mind.
She was the first woman to arrive at that party.
Flying also served a national purpose as well as just like hanging out time. It was now how long distance mail was being transported at the time. There was talk of extending air mail service to Los Angeles, but here's the problem with that in 1922. There's no municipal airport. Glendale, many thought, was a perfect place for an air terminal. There was plenty of empty acreage. Glendale was one of the fastest growing cities. There was already a hub of air activity here. It was to make it the city that it would, like LA needed like a couple things like the Olympics to make it like a real city. Mm-hmm. Glendale needed this.
Watch yourself. You're stepping on my territory.
You can talk about the Olympics again?
Oh, no.
Oh, what have I done?
I've got to go back to my files.
So acting upon the word of the Aero Club of Southern California, the Glendale City Council, and the Commercial Aviation Association, they all agreed that it was time to open up a municipal airport, and it would be in Glendale. They had a meeting at the behest of the Chamber of Commerce to come up with the funds for the 33-acre ranch that ran along the Southern Pacific Railroad tracks fairly close to the LA River between what is now San Fernando Road and Griffith Park. The first person to lease land on the airport was a man named Winfield B. Kenner, or Bert Kenner. He was the first person to open up a little space on the Glendale lot. Kenner is tied with both Netta Snook, who was his employee, and Amelia Earhart, who they were both teaching her how to fly. He sold her first.
He wasn't really teaching her.
But
she bought her plane from him.
But he was around her.
Yeah, well, not by her choice. Okay.
Kenner had a family operation there in Glendale with his wife Cora and the kids helping out. They worked the office. They helped build and sew things that went on wings because wings used to have fabric. They lived beside the
fabric gives you wings.
You ever eat fabric before? They lived beside the airfield on Flower Street in a small frame house. One day, the chief of police summoned Bert Kenner and told him, Kenner, we need a man out there to keep an eye on things. Some of these young aviator fellows are real hell raisers. There'll be no trick flying over this town. Arrest anyone you catch breaking the rules, and gave Kenner a deputy badge and an extra $25 a month, which back then in 20s accumulated to $50,000. So the Glendale Municipal Airport officially opened in March of 1923. There was an air rodeo to celebrate. They had air races, stunt flying contests, demonstrations of this new thing called skywriting, and nobody knew how to read because it was the 20s.
Exposed ankles. Don't look at it, Timmy. Don't look at it.
Sinners.
Put on your widow's gown, which all kids had to wear back then. You're saying this is a municipal airport. This was a Glendale municipal airport.
Glendale Municipal Airport. It was incorporated in a different city and everything, but the municipal airport closed a month later.
A resounding success.
What'd you write that skywriting that got it closed in a month?
Bankrupt.
By the time they got to the T, it was all over.
They couldn't even do the T.
A Mr. Montgomery of the city council, and himself a wealthy developer of residential properties, so there he already has a motive, contested the airport for its alleged improprieties in connection with the purchase of the lot and a tract known as Verdugo Park and demanded the contract to be revoked. He apparently said airplanes are never going to amount to anything, and that park is too far out of town to be any value to the community. What you don't get about airplanes is that you fly there.
You're a slacker airplane, just like your father.
Just like your father.
Dirigible.
Hot air balloons.
This will go the way of the whirligig. You hear me.
The guy who saved the day or led the charge to save the day was a Thomas C. Young, or Doc, who had built the first. I feel like I've said all the names that lead to Back to the Future reference. I've said all of them. Yeah. This guy named McFly because he flew.
He was the first Irish person who could fly, so they called him McFly.
He actually learned it from Chuck Berry.
He learned how to fly from a black pilot, but he didn't get the credit.
He didn't get the credit for it. There actually is a guy in his story named Wallace Berry. Anyways, Doc had built the first private hangar on the field. He was also the Southland's leading champion of aviation and chief spokesman for the Western Aero League. He pulled money together with 6 other associates and bought the airport acreage for $66,000. These 7 guys did this. They called themselves the Glendale Airport Association. And soon enough, they had also cleared the way for the runway to be extended to 1,200 feet. Over the next decade, several aviation enthusiasts would lease spots on the lot to either like build or test aeroplanes with an E. The Glendale fire chief, Art LAXperts, had been interested in aviation and learning how to fly. He was convinced that there had to be a better use of planes, and one of these ways was to help firefighting and spotting brush fires faster. He bought a jetting plane for $600 and painted it fire engine red and wrote Glendale Fire Department on it in yellow letters.
I thought you were saying that they painted it red and then wrote it in red paint.
Nah, you see it, right? You see it. You'll see it from the air.
You must be colorblind.
Once a fire happens, it's like a
it's
black
like magic
light.
ink.
Yeah.
It's like the One Ring. Just throw it in the fire and you'll see.
What's that from? Is that another Back to the Future reference?
Back to the Future, the Two Towers.
It was never put to use to put out fires, but it was utilized for spotting fires. But the idea essentially is that people are taking air travel more seriously and finding practical uses for it. Big help was having Burt Kinner and his company on the Glendale lot because Kinner made affordable planes that every man could afford, and Glendale Airfield
every rich man could afford.
Every rich man could afford. But because they were more affordable, anybody was like, I'm going to buy a plane and see what I could do with it. There was opportunities to be had there because of Kinner. Also on the
safe as ever.
Also on the airfield, it offered like several people who could teach you how to fly or to do repairs on airplanes. Also in the same field, people were experimenting involving planes and aircrafts as well. So all this is happening in the Glendale Municipal Airport lot. We should mention also, oh boy. Okay, so there's this airship and it's known as the City of Glendale. It's called the City of Glendale, which was a 212-foot prototype of a 337,000 cubic feet capacity all-metal dirigible. All metal dirigible. Its cabin was 180 feet and it was designed to carry 40 passengers and a crew of 5 people. The man behind us was Captain Thomas Benton Slate, and he envisioned the ability to move large amounts of people across the sky to their destinations. Its ability to hover was attributed to the Slate system of propulsion, which I don't really understand, but it comes into play later, which presupposed the existence of a turbine-generated protective vacuum enveloping the airship at all times. So from what I can tell, it thought that there was going to be a vacuum of space underneath it to keep it from hovering with the help of jet propulsions pushing it off the ground, and then it would create a vacuum of
so it's
air.
like those things that float like an inch above the water.
I imagine they thought it was going to be like that. From the words that I read when I wrote that down, it made like, okay, I think I get like air's going to push off the ground, it's just going to hover. So in September of 1926, several thousand well-wishers gathered to watch the
I love when well-wishers are around.
Oh yeah,
because we've been there.
And thrill seekers and well-wishers gathered to watch. We have been there. Several thousand well-wishers, thrill seekers gathered to watch the first piece of the airship's ribs be laid.
What is that?
They gathered to watch the first piece of it be constructed. This is Prohibition times and there was no TV.
They watched them construct a dirigible.
Just the first part.
And it had ribs?
Well, you know, like the dirigible has to have like support systems. So like it has like those things that look like ribs. So they watched it.
Baby back?
No, but they are covered in barbecue sauce.
I'd watch it.
Okay, so the dirigible was ready in late 1927 to have the airship's keel placed.
What's it?
It's probably the back end.
Okay.
The rump. The rump.
The ribs, the rump. We're getting into the... Tell me about the sirloin.
In January, okay, here it comes, 1929, it was ready to have 5,000 people come out and stare at the finished dirigible body that still had no means of propulsion because the steam turbines had not been installed yet. No TV, no alcohol. But they keep coming back.
Population of Los Angeles go crazy.
They keep coming back. But then, December...
Tune in next week for
Seats. In December 1929, on the anniversary of the first test flight of the Wright brothers Kitty Hawk, the City of Glendale airship emerged from the hangar, and after 30 minutes, it was unemerged because it wasn't working. 2 days later, they brought it back out, and on that second day, it took flight, but a light wind began rocking the dirigible, and people on the port side saw a giant bulge forming on the upper section of the bow. Then rivet heads started bursting off, sounding like gunshots. And this is so funny. The city of Glendale let out a groan from within the airship, and it rocked to one side before plopping onto the ground. And that was the last time the metal dirigible would attempt to be used. But Captain Slate lived to be 99 years old and never doubted that his all-metal airship would one day come of age, even though he had decades early dismantled it.
I love when hubris gets humbled in a safe and funny manner.
I love once the rivet heads start popping, it sounds like gunshots. The city of Glendale pretends to be shot. It lets out a groan and then it just plops on the ground like, and it never gets back up.
It's just the silly Hindenburg.
No. Well, this is the worst thing that'll ever happen to a dirigible.
Oh, the expected humanity.
Oh, the humility. They had private investors come in and they wanted to turn this into the municipal airport of the greater Los Angeles area. There wasn't one, and they wanted this to be the hub. Because money and city bureaucracy tend to slow or stunt advances, a group of venture capitalists led by Captain Charles Spicer. Everybody in the story is a captain or lieutenant. Spicer bought...
Because we're leading up to America Infinity War. It's funny. It's funny. Oh, come on.
The Spicer Group extended the acreage of the airport from 45 acres to 175 acres, which would all be used as an airline terminal. A new name was devised by aviation publicist Victor Clark. He wanted to call it the Grand Central Air Terminal, GCAT, I'll call it from now on. Spicer and his group, which included Jack Maddox, who was the Lincoln distributor for Los Angeles, and the Maddox in Maddox Airlines. He was essential in providing a twice daily air service between LA to San Diego a year previously. Since that start, he was able to connect San Francisco, San Diego, Imperial Valley, El Paso, and Phoenix. Now starting to build a network of places where you can land planes. For GCAT, Maddox and group began buying larger tri-motor planes and preparing for the commercialization of air travel, meaning that this plane could and would have airline passengers. No more daredevils and eccentric rich people, them too, but also like regular people who want to travel.
By motors at this point, they weren't jets, but it wasn't propellers at this point.
I think they hadn't mixed all three yet, because eventually what it is propellers, wings, and engines, right? And just luck.
Yeah.
And a lot of luck.
And the smooth body. I don't know.
Lots of prayer. Yeah, but these are tri-motor planes, so I imagine there's 3 engines and some wings. So yeah, now
and a side of fries, please.
Some ribs.
Fed Glendale for decades.
Now, I'm not clear when this happened, but either right before or soon after they opened, which I'll get to in a minute, the Spicer Group sold the air terminal, which now had 8 destinations altogether, places to land. They had them all linked together. Spicer Group sold it to Curtis with 2 S's, Airport Corporation, which Spicer now was a director of Curtis. So the Grand Central Air Terminal became the property of the newly formed Curtis Wright, as in the Wright brothers flying services. The official opening of the Grand Central Air Terminal was on Friday, February 22nd, 1929, and this was not their first air rodeo. The opening was I got back to it.
Fancy that.
It's pretty on brand of Greg. This was no skywriting, daredevils, plane racing thing. This was a gala, white glove style event, and they said they had over 200 film stars and several aviation pioneers in attendance. Actress Dolores Del Rio was there. Governor C.C. Young was there. Heavyweight champion of the world Jack Dempsey was there. Major C.C. Mosley, who becomes an integral part of the story, was the co-founder of Western Air Express, was there. Gary Cooper was there. Wallace Berry, the pilot, was there. He was actually an actor, I think, who
the
actor who liked flying a lot. Jean Harlow was there. She
ended up having not a great experience with planes, didn't she?
No.
Isn't that what happened to Jean Harlow?
No, she died of an overdose, but
I thought she died in a plane crash.
No.
Who died in a plane crash?
Patsy Cline.
Not Patsy Cline. There was someone else. John Denver. Who? There was someone else. I thought Jean Harlow died in a plane crash. Who's the one that died in a plane crash and then they later thought that she was a spy?
Oh, Amelia Earhart.
The other one.
The other one. I'm blanking. I just thought Julia Childs, but just the spy part. Yeah, just that she was a spy. Let's name all the spies. Now,
Goldeneye, Oddjob, Trevelyan,
Wallace Berry,
Jaws.
Now, the year previously, Lucky Lindy himself, Charles Lindbergh, had his first nonstop flight from New York to Paris, which was a big deal. Transcontinental flight is now possible. The Transcontinental Air Transport (TAT) line opened in May of 1928, and Lindbergh was hoping to do another long flight like this, and after surveying different air terminals, chose Glendale as Transcontinental Air Transport's western terminus, meaning it offered the first paved runway west of the Rocky Mountains and served as a departure point for the nation's first transcontinental air service right here in Glendale, California. That makes Grand Central Air Terminal the first major airport in the LA area. TAT proposed to provide a 40-hour coast-to-coast service using a 16-passenger Ford 5AT tri-motor transports. I don't know any of those words, but they wanted to get you coast-to-coast in 48 hours, and they had devised a plan to do do that. Here's the thing about the late 20s jazz age air travel. It might have evolved away from like the bicycle with wings stuff, but it was still nowhere near it where it is now. So these pilots were still really nervous about night flying. They were scared about flying over like the Rocky Mountains and rough terrain areas where the wind is different. So what this was a coast-to-coast 48-hour flight with many stops, where the distance in between air terminals was filled with non-stop train rides. And we mean non-stop, so they're coming up on Biloxi. You better land running because you have to catch a flight soon, and you better make that flight in time because you have a train waiting for you. So you take a plane from one city to the next, you get off, you take a train all night or whatever.
So there's another plane waiting for you
at the other side of the, and I think it had like 8 stops across major American cities. I don't know how that was done in 48 hours. Like you must have not, like the plane must have gone so fast. The train like must have, like silent movies when it's going cartoonishly fast, like trains don't go right. They must have been going like a bullet train.
Buster Keaton must have been operating the train.
He could ride on the I said the trunk of it. Jesus.
The front trunk.
The front trunk.
The fanny, but in the British sense.
But this eventually evolved as air travel was doing, and many people credit Glendale Air Terminal as being the birthplace of scheduled airlines. This was kicked off in July of 1929 with another huge ceremony. In attendance were the Lindberghs, Gloria Swanson, Mayor of LA John Porter, who was a known member of the KKK, Douglas Fairbanks, chili dog glutton Mary Pickford christened the city of Los Angeles with a bottle of grape juice because it was still prohibition. And also at some point, TAT becomes TWA, Trans World Airlines, a major airline. We should also talk about the terminal and the tower because they are astounding pieces of Art Deco architecture. It didn't go up until 1930, and it was designed by architect Henry Gogarty. I know.
I love what he did in the 90s.
It combines Spanish colonial revival with Art Deco designs. It's got great archways. And like, I'm not someone who's like, ooh, archways. But like the archways there, I'm like, oh, this is nice archways. An arcade.
You are that person.
No.
Ooh, an arcade without Frogger in the British sense.
The tower, which is a beautiful tower, has statues of figures carved into it. The roof was made with red Spanish tile. There's colorful tiles all along the walls. The terminal waiting area is beautiful. It's a spacious area full of like arches and tile work. There was a bar called the Cockpit Cocktail Bar, a dining hall, a sandwich shop. If you want to know what this building looks like, it was used in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Pee-wee Herman in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. When Simone gets on the bus and leaves Pee-wee, and then she's like, au revoir, Pee-wee, and then she leaves, and then he tries to buy a ticket, and then Andy's there and chases him across another state. That bus terminal is Grand Central Air Terminal.
When was this building built?
1930. Apparently, there was also a 2-story Spanish hacienda-style building across the field that was supposedly a secret VIP lounge for upper-tier... Okay, that's not the supposedly part. There was a VIP lounge for upper-tier guests to drink and mingle. Apparently, this is the part that's supposed. Apparently, there was a secret door that led to the LA River path in case the G-men came looking for booze. They want your Mike's Hard Lemonade. They want it.
I'd stick with getting arrested if it's that between escaping through the LA River.
Just get me. Here's some things that have happened over like the 30s and 40s. Edith Flows flew out of there on a Kinner Power. I know.
It's almost like you were forced into a profession because of your name back then.
Listen, you could either swim or fly. You got to do one of those flows. She had a Kinner-powered Alexander Bullet, and she got second place in the Power Puff Derby, which was like a race.
Yeah, we talked about that with
Amelia
we did. Earhart.
Yeah, that's right. She got second place. And 2 months later, she became the first woman to fly a scheduled airline. She flew out of Glendale. Howard Hughes, old Pee-Pee Jar himself, was a regular. Pee-Pee Herman was a regular at GCAT and used the hangar there to...
Howard Hughes in Pee-Pee Herman's Big Adventure.
His big adventure was just washing his hands. Being able to leave the house was his big adventure. Howard Hughes...
Getting the newspaper.
Oh, I'm bankrupt. He was a regular there because he had a hangar there where he used to store many of his planes that he would crash.
That's not all he stored in those hangars. Jars of pee-pee.
He would crash many of his planes because he probably saw germs on the propellers, and these gremlins are unclean.
There's a germ on the wing.
Florence Pancho Barnes became the fastest woman in the world when she clocked in at 196.2 miles per hour in August of 1930. She kept her Travel Air R plane at the GCAT hangar and would do test runs there. In 1933, a New Jersey surgeon, Albert Forsyth, and Charles Anderson landed at GCAT, becoming the first African Americans to complete a transcontinental flight that happened at GCAT. Famous pilot and record breaker Laura Ingalls took off from GCAT, as did the Lindberghs, once again to break old records for speed across the country. They did Glendale to New York in 7 hours and 28 minutes. When Lucky Lindy flew the Lockheed Model 14 special around the world in 91 hours for a new record in 1938, his plane landed in Glendale. 1934, Shirley Temple movie Bright Eyes was used in the air terminal as a backdrop. That's where she sings on the good ship Lolly. She sings that on a plane while a group of businessmen are like, this is cool. I like it.
In-flight entertainment.
Yeah, Shirley Temple was pretty cool. Doris Day singing Hooray for Ha. Remember we had to watch that movie when we were writing the parody of it?
Yeah.
That's at Glendale Central Air Terminal. Hooray for Hollywood! They also shot Sky Giant and Central Airport there. There was a lot of speculation that the airport was used for the ending of Casablanca. It's not true.
No, that's the Van Nuys Airport.
Thank you. The Douglas DC-1 was what many people have called the first modern airplane, or at least it was the prototype of the first modern airplane. The DC-3 would be the one that revolutionized civil aviation, the first commercial transport aircraft. That was a DC-3. Up to that point, aircrafts have been like wooden frames and metal skins with 3 engines.
Lots of ribs.
Lots of ribs. The DC-3 actually had a metal hull, strong multi-spar wings. It had 2 700 HP engines. Its grandpa was a DC-1 that was housed at Glendale.
My grandpa was a DC-1.
No way! We're probably related. It initially rolled out of Santa Monica without much fanfare. Nobody really cared, but after an almost crash, I think it was set to be repaired and then certified to fly again, and it was on display at Glendale Central Air Terminal for 2 years. During the 40s, during whichever World War was happening, in World War Infinity War, they like to use the war a lot.
As much as possible. 13-year-old boys love that word more than anything.
Was it Star Wars or Infinity Wars? No, it's actually Dinosaur Wars. It's Dino Wars. The airport was used as a training facility for pilots and mechanics. After Pearl Harbor, civilians were barred from using the terminal, so it became like a place where mostly they would train different types of air brigades and stuff like that. Soldiers prepared for missions by training with planes flown all over the valley, flown from Glendale. They tested, it was an operational P-38 fighter base. They also needed, because of Pearl Harbor, to hide in plain sight. They needed to hide the terminal. So they filled the runway and dirt with brushes and stuff, but they also, that wasn't enough. So they painted the airport to look like streets, fields, and houses from the air.
Yeah, LAX did a similar thing.
Did they draw little people walking on the ground?
Yeah.
And like, hi, Betsy.
The animatronic waving people.
Lockheed was based in Burbank, which is a hop, skip, but not a jump. But Lockheed planes were ran and tested at GCAT as well. The Curtis Wright Flight School was conducted at Grand Central, training several hundred young pilots for flight and mechanics. Curtis Wright had it since before it opened, 1929. Now C.C. Mosley, who was one of the first guys there watching it, he established the Curtis Wright Technical Institute, which would be teaching pilots how to be mechanics and how to fly. But the post-war years were rough for the airport, as LAX had opened and gained momentum over the 30s, as did the Hollywood Burbank Airport.
Yeah, Burbank had eclipsed them.
Pretty early on. They were more capable, more evolved than the air terminal built when airplanes were much different. Commercial air travel needed room, and GCAT didn't have any. The landscape of Glendale was inconvenient, as it was between the Verdugo Mountains and Griffith Park and Mount Lee, so planes could only go like east or west. Also, Glendale was somehow more of a residential area than Burbank somehow. In the 50s, the airport was beginning to get run down as it was being neglected. Nobody was really using it as much as planes got bigger. It was outdated and inconvenient. The runway was too small, so it officially closed in 1959. The area, meaning the terminal and the street alongside the airfield, became industrial office spaces. Large portions of the beautiful terminal and tower were demolished in the early 90s, and whatever was left had not been touched until 2012, when its current owner, the Disney Corporation, decided to renovate the structure. If you remember, for our episode Themes, Schemes, and Oceanside Dreams, Walt Disney was looking at lands around there to survey for Disneyland, so it probably was still in his mind.
I'll just take this airport.
Mickey Mouse wants to live there. That's what Mickey Mouse
property. And if any of you from Burbank come over here, I'll castrate you myself.
Fly you off a cliff. One-wing plane, friend.
You thought it was bad when that dirigible lost its wings? You should try it for yourself.
Walt Disney Imagineering purchased the office park, and it's now where the DreamWorks Animation and Walt Disney Imagineering campuses are along the river. It's called the Disney Grand Central Creative Campus, so they worked the title into it. Disney has restored the building to its almost original grandeur, and it offers tours, which I took. Really great tour. They can be kind of tricky to find, not only find how to schedule it, but also scheduling it. Like the tours are like between 1 to 2, but it's worth it if you can do it. I'll put a link on when we do that. If you're driving in Glendale, you can see the tower and the building on the street. The address is 1310 Airway, which is between Sonora and Grandview. It runs behind San Fernando, closer to the river. The tours are great. The waiting area where they showed us is really great. The site, the airport, not the website. The airport was designated a Glendale Historical Landmark in 1977. It's
beautiful
eligible.
Art Deco on that website.
Oh my God. The links, the lettering for the links.
Look at this arcade. I can play Frogger here.
It's eligible now for a California Register for Historic Resources and a National Register for Historic Places. Also, Brands Castle, Mirador, still intact. Now a public library in the city of Glendale, 1601 Westbound Drive. Their collection only has art and music, and it's perfect. They renovated in 2010, and go visit it.